All right. Hi, Cinnamon. Thanks for joining me in this wonderful interview that hopefully we are recording well enough over the huge pond between us. All the way from...
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're where, in Amsterdam?
Yes. Amsterdam, the Netherlands.
Oh my gosh, that sounds amazing. So do you travel back and forth to the States a lot?
I haven't as of yet, although I expect to be doing more of it in the next year. And getting the business started here has kind of kept me in Europe, basically. But next year, I think I'll be doing a couple of trips.
Oh,
and maybe
great.
One at the end of this year.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Well, let's see. How do we know each other? I met you years and years ago in Seattle as sort of the go-to lawyer for artists that I knew. I mean, that's I guess our first introduction, right? Or did we meet before that somehow? Otherwise,
I think Greg introduced us. I met you at Vito's, I'm sure.
Oh, that's right. Greg Lundgren introduced us. He's the best.
Yes, he is.
He's putting on Out of Sight in Seattle, the art fair that's in conjunction with the most recent one that Art Miami is going to be doing, or Miami Project or something. He's been working day and night on that thing. Have you heard about it?
Yes, I've been following it on Facebook because I love to see. I'm really curious to see what projects he's got going because he's got an amazing mind and an amazing drive, actually.
Yeah. God.
So it's always
I don't know anyone who works harder than him. Yeah. Well, let's see. I guess my first question for you is, how did you really get involved in wanting to represent artists and in art specific law? I mean, what does that mean even? And how did you start doing it?
Let's see. So I was always been interested in art, just like it. As I like to joke that those who can't do represent. So much as I love art. I'm definitely an amateur. But when I went to law school, the summer before I started, a friend of mine's father actually made this idle comment. His wife said something about, Cinnamon's going off to law school. And he said, well, that's great. She can do something with her interest in art. And his wife looked at him like, what does that mean? But I heard, I was like, heavenly chorus. So it was a perfect fit, except for I wasn't headed to a law school that specialized in art. So, and ever since then, I love the issues. It's a great general practice. The people are wonderful. There's a lot of great resources. It makes me very happy.
So, how long have you been working with artists?
Oh, let's see, probably almost 20 years. Yes, I think pretty early on. Started working, it's definitely been, wow, I feel really old right now. But
welcome. Don't feel alone.
Yeah. Well, it was fun. When I first did it, I you have to get the experience. And so I did lots of trade. So for a long time, the only art that was actually framed in my house was clients' work, essentially. And it just sort of built from there. But, I guess you were asking earlier, what is art law? And for me, basically, it's just always been sort of a catch-all. Basically, I treat it as sort of a general practice. And I deal with issues that come up in things like estate planning or contracts, copyright, setting businesses up, but with an art twist to it. So I cast my net pretty wide. But
what is
art law?
In your experience, what does that art twist look like?
So, for example, somebody is interested in setting up a bar, for example, with a gallery component to it.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, exactly. So they come to me, and then you work with them on the small business side of this is how you get your license. This is the paperwork you file with the state and the city to get yourself set up properly. And then some of that's just business. General business kind of practice. And then there are art aspects. So if your bar or gallery is going to be selling artists' work for commission, for example, in Washington State, there's supposed to be a written contract between you. So I'll help them with the kind of contract, because the kind of contract you'd use with an artist is obviously different than you'd use with your IT guy or the person who's doing the plastering and the renovation.
Right. That makes sense. So, so what are those common kind of, I guess, problem that you end up solving when you're introduced to an artist? Is it always a case by case, or does it seem like, oh, another one of these? Oh, yep, that same old thing that never got done right. Is there a theme that you've noticed?
Yeah, so I was trying to, when you asked about doing this interview the other day, I was out with a friend and I was joking about, I was like, okay, what are my soapboxes? I would say that my soapboxes relate to the problems I see the most of. And they're usually my two soapboxes, two, there's probably like 100 of them, but two I complain about most, are the importance of contracts. I see a lot of issues because people are really funny about contracts. Particularly artists get a lot of static from the outside world when they want to use contracts and be very practical about their business. It's treated as, well, we don't need to have this in writing. Why would you want a contract? Isn't a gentleman's agreement enough? This is the nature of the business. You hear a lot of stuff like that.
Right.
The other thing you see is, artists, particularly, you get these really exciting projects where artists are working together, in these kind of joint venture-ishy things. And people don't want to be that person who says we should put this all in a contract, but that's really the way to make those kinds of projects successful and to stay friends, essentially, with the people you do the project with. So that would be one. And the other is copyright. I'm big for copyright registration. And I think it's just partly because particularly up-and-coming artists are at such a disadvantage in terms of resources, to fight lawsuits and to protect their work. And when you register, you don't have to register with the Federal Copyright Office to have copyright. That exists even without registration in the U.S., but you do need to register with the federal office to get certain advantages. So I would say those are two of the areas where I see the biggest issues, are copyright registration, and some fair use issues, and then contracts.
What do you mean by fair use issues? I mean, talk to me like I'm five. Like, what is a fair use of what?
I'm gonna be using. Okay, so fair use is one of the exceptions to. So copyright's a bundle of exclusive rights. Boy, I'm gonna be really general about this and be totally lawyerly. But so basically, just a general description. Copyright's a bundle of rights. Give exclusive rights. So when you paint something, you paint a painting, you have the exclusive right to reproduce that painting for a limited period of years, like 60. But
that's good enough. That works. 60 years.
Yeah. So you have a limited protection where basically the government's available, i.e. through court, to reinforce the protecting of your work. There are exceptions, though. So the idea is, okay, you have copyright. Once it's created, you have that period of time. And then theoretically, you have the exclusive right to do a reproduction of your work, or to perform it if say you're a choreographer or a musician.
Sure.
And I'll give you a cheat sheet with this discussed a little bit better, but in any event,
awesome. Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm just realizing, I'm like, how to condense this all into 5 minutes. So cheat sheet. But in any event, so you have the exclusive right. Well, what happens is fair use is this limitation on the protection, and basically what it says is it allows the person to do something that might be characterized as a reproduction otherwise. But within, let's see, for purposes of commentary. So, let's say you paint Barbie, and you paint Barbie in some sort of very political outfit. This is a slightly bit different because it's a trademark issue as well as copyright issue, but essentially the idea is that if the underlying image is copyrighted, if you're saying something or adding something new to the reproduction, that may or may not be fair use, which would allow you to essentially what would be technically infringing on the exclusive rights of the artist. But there's this exception that's carved out.
And
so one of the things, yeah. So the exception, the thing about the exception, so the idea is like fair use is it's a limited permission to use to infringe on the author or artist copyright, exclusive right to do certain things. So we say it's in the idea is that it's in the interest of the public for there to be certain commentary or free usage of these things, and so they're going to carve out a limited exception. So like with appropriation art, that's where you see a lot of fair use discussion, for example, because, somebody like Prince will do, you saw the suicide Instagram girls case recently?
No, what was that?
It's not really a case because there's no lawsuit, but essentially Richard Prince took suicide girl Instagram photos and then basically slapped some text on them and reproduced them as basically identically, but with some additional text, and then turned around and sold the pieces.
Oh, okay.
For maybe $90,000 a piece, something insane. So people look at that and go, wait, that's just copying. He's not really doing anything. Well, then the argument turns into this sort of fair use idea. Boy, I'm sorry. I'm just down the rabbit hole on this one.
You are. But so there's a fair use idea. So if somebody is basically creating their own images, it's really easy for someone else to kind of step in and potentially not do a whole lot and
yes.
take their images if they don't go through the right steps to really protect themselves and protect their images, right?
Yes. So you should always protect your images. Part of the reasons you should protect your images with federal registration is because if it comes to a lawsuit, you want all the advantages you can, and federal registration, because most up-and-coming artists, as I said, they don't have the funds to hire a lawyer to go. Richard Prince has quite a lot of money, so he can fight these cases, but somebody with less money or, less resources, if you did the same thing he did, you might find yourself being sued and you might find yourself losing. It's not a clear-cut question about what is and what isn't appropriate fair use.
That kind of brings up one of my most pressing questions as an artist and outside of the arts too, and just in the world of legalese and the law. I mean, it sounds like, and I hate to be so cynical, but it's like he who has the higher paycheck wins the court case because you can be just drugged through the mud. So I've seen these clauses that can kind of overarchingly sort of serve as protection, like forced mediation, like in any contract, if it says, hey, we both agree to go to mediation first, then the person who has more money to pay a lawyer doesn't necessarily win because they can't pay more money for the lawyers to just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. You can go, hey, we want to go to a cheaper option, this mediation. Is that kind of one easy way to always be, one easy clause to throw into everything to maybe potentially sort of protect those of us who don't have a really high paycheck if we ever ended up in that horrible situation of having to fight the rich, so to speak?
Yeah. Essentially, the things you want to do, and so this would be contractual language, but yes, and it's called an alternative dispute resolution clause. And essentially what it is it's the parties agreeing that they're going to go for mediation or arbitration, which is, it's not cheap, but it's less expensive than your average federal litigation, which also stretches for a long period of time and can be indefinite and extraordinarily costly. So that's one of the things. If you have a provision like that in your contract, with anybody, whether it's with other artists you're doing a project with, whether it's somebody who's commissioning work from you, whether it's with your gallery, essentially what that clause is attempting to do is say, okay, we're going to go with this cheaper, not cheap, but cheaper means of dealing with dispute issues. Yeah, so that's a really good thing to have in your contract.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's one thing that I'm just I try to keep an eye out for, but since I don't speak legalese, I'm always is that thing in there? Is that I should remember this one thing about, what was the word? And you're like, arbitration. Oh, arbitration, right. I mean, it really is it's a different world, and it's nice to have people in your world that actually want to serve the people in my world, because we do not speak that language. It is a hard language to speak.
It is, and it's like I guess one of the things that occurs to me. So, like, I definitely want to make a pitch for the various volunteer lawyers associations for the arts around the country. Washington has Washington Lawyers for the Arts. There's also which is, I think, doing a better job of getting they're very conscientiously trying to get past Seattle. So they've got some great projects throughout the state. The really famous one is New York's Volunteer Lawyers for the Arts. They do amazing work. But it's worth, I think, if you're getting started as an artist professionally, I think it's worth checking out whether or not one of these organizations is anywhere near you. They're designed to be helpful. They oftentimes will have a list. They'll have resources. They'll know who the lawyers are locally who deal with these kinds of issues. Because that's basically who makes up their membership and does their talks and so forth. But that's the other thing is oftentimes these groups will put on like 1 or 2 hour seminars by some of the best lawyers in the field. And essentially you just go have your lunch, for example, and listen to an hour or two on copyright for filmmakers or fair use issues for graphic artists, that sort of thing. So that I highly recommend in terms of a low budget way to get really superior advice in general.
That makes perfect sense. That sounds like a great resource to go check out, and I'll be putting that in our resources and notes or on our cheat sheet after this for sure. That sounds like a really good idea. And also, I mean, you can find, is that pretty standard in most states that there's some sort of, legal representatives for the arts-ish thing, or is that really just in larger cities? Have you found that to be, I don't know, more universal?
I think, I don't have a good sense of how many there are, although I'll definitely probably take a look at that just because of curiosity. I think that if you don't, it's worth Googling to see, just like type your state volunteer lawyers for the arts and see if there's anything, because you may be surprised. I'm pretty sure New Mexico must because of the arts community there. That would be my guess. But the other option is every state has a bar association, a state bar association, and they're also very helpful people. And so if you don't easily find a listing for a volunteer lawyers group in your state, your state bar will probably have a much better idea of whether one exists and what's the closest thing to it if it doesn't. They may have some good suggestions of people to talk to, for example.
Awesome. So okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely are very passionate about this. It sounds like, do you have any one story that really sticks out as just, oh my God, I'm so glad that I was able to win this one? Or, any like particular case that really sticks out as the one that you're like, oh God, the artists who need the help?
Wow. I'm sorry, my brain's a bit crispy. I'm thinking because I'm like they're flashing through my mind.
We're going to like the story section, yeah.
Let's see. I definitely not so much. I don't do any litigation now. I'm trying to think. I definitely had cases where. There are cases where basically, again, my contract soapbox, there are definitely cases where I can't get into too much detail, but where some very simple language in the contract would have really helped people out. In particular, it's thinking of one where basically it was a group of, a couple of people trying to set up an arts nonprofit. Yeah. And, I'm sorry. They're blurring together. Okay. So there's one where somebody wanted to set up an arts nonprofit and they came to me and I quoted them a price for it. And they were just like, that's ridiculous, blah, 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 that's too much, blah, blah, blah. And it's always funny when somebody says that and they've been talking to you about how they're planning on raising $1 million or $10 million. And then they just like, no, this is too much money. And I remember that person came back to me And again, it just always stuck out in my head because I didn't actually end up working with them, but I quoted them one price. And when they came back to me 5 years later, the thing was just a disaster. And the people who had wanted to set it up were at each other's throats, and they hadn't done any of the underlying paperwork to say who makes what decisions or how do you wrap this up or even how do we run this thing. And they were looking at, I think, at least 5 times the price, the original price, to get them out of the situation they were in. So it's definitely one of those, I see that often where basically somebody says, oh, this is too expensive. And I mean, obviously you can't spend money you don't have, but in terms of investment, I think it's always worth it to, particularly for projects, joint ventures among fellow artists. I think it's always worth it to spend the money to get everything spelled out. Because it's prohibitively expensive later on when you haven't done that and then you're trying to make everything go the right way.
Oh, right. So course correction is more expensive than course creation, essentially.
It definitely is. And I mean, people, part of the problem, the reason I say you stay friends, I mean, it's no guarantee you stay friends, but one of the things is humans don't remember what they say. I mean, humans are so convinced that well, of course, this language is in this letter, or, but of course we agreed to this. And if you put it in writing, then you're looking back 5 years ago, you're looking at something you did 5 years ago, and one person might be, I swear that we agreed that I got 50%. And then if you look at it in writing, in a contract, it's like, oh, actually it was 35%. And it may even say why it was 35% instead of 50. But that person who thinks it's 50, absent the contract, they are going to be prepared to go to their grave swearing it was 50%, even if the other person's like, no, it was 40.
Right.
We're just terrible with that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's what I see is people going, this is too much money to spend, and then coming back with just some horrendous cluster 5 or 6 years later.
So engineer around the weaknesses that you know you have, because you're a human being. You're not going to remember.
Yeah, I mean, just, and the other thing is the process of nailing, if you sit with your partner, you guys have this great idea, whatever. But if you work through, I mean, I think
whatever. That's the bulk of what artists are thinking of is I had this great idea though. You're like, yeah, whatever. Still made a contract.
But you can, it's kind of I don't mean to be flip, but I mean, basically, you are much more likely, I think, to be successful with a fantastic idea if you sit down with the people you're going to be working with and figure out. I tell people to think 2 things. What's your best case? Imagine phenomenal success. What does that look like? And then imagine if this goes all, tits up. Basically, imagine the best case scenario and the worst case scenario. Most likely, you're just going to sail through the middle. But you don't want to be in a position where, say, you collaborated on something that's sort of mixed media with a play component or a theatrical component and a visual arts component. You don't want to be in a position where somebody wants to buy the rights to that and you don't know how those rights get divided. You've got somebody who wants to write you a big check, but you haven't dealt with. You kind of never thought that was really going to happen, and so you haven't spelled out who gets what percentage or how things get. If somebody's interested in investing, it's better to plan before somebody's coming at you with money for how you're going to handle that. What do you require an investor? That sort of thing.
Right, absolutely. Wow, I never even thought of that. I mean, yes, planning for your best scenario as well as your worst. I mean, I guess I usually think about what the worst scenario could be, but the best, I mean, it matters a lot. Yeah. I mean, how are you?
It really does.
That's a wonderful.
It's terrible to try and agree on these things. Yeah, it's wonderful, except for you. It's like, oh wait, you've got a band, and it's like, well, so and so wrote this, but I don't know, did we agree that everybody would share equally? I mean, you don't want to be having those conversations when somebody's waiting for you with a checkbook, because, well, it's a sign of weakness to them, for one thing, but it's also like, you don't stay friends if you're fighting for percentages when money comes into the picture.
Oh, that's true. That's so true. Oh, God, that sounds like a nightmare. I mean, it's a good nightmare to have and a terrible nightmare to have. You know what I mean?
Fun. It's fun for the lawyers. I mean, we get paid and we get great issues and it's interesting problems and it's better but it's difficult for the client.
Yeah, I bet. So, I guess, to make it really simple, like what would you recommend, to most artists, no matter what discipline they're in, just to have a quick consult or a free consult with an attorney, just to do the quick half hour. Hey, here's what I think I want to do. Here's my ideal of what I would do. Here's what I'm getting into. What might it cost me to set this up right? Is that sort of where you fall in the setup process?
I think what I'd say if you're getting started, because again, like budgets are an issue. I mean, it's awesome if you have endless resources, and then I would say, please call me right now. No, no, just kidding, guys. But I think in terms of like, if you're getting started, I think you should think. I think it's important. My most successful clients all view me as like the way they see their accountant. It's just kind of like, I don't want to deal with, I've gotten to a certain level of success, or this is enough of an issue that I don't want to deal with it myself. And I want to be free to create. And I'm a business person because I feed myself with my art. And this is just a business expense, tax deductible. But essentially, I think it's good to get a relationship going with a lawyer. Even if it's just, have a card so that if there's an emergency or something, a lot of lawyers don't necessarily start the meter running as soon as you pick up the phone. You should always check on that because you never know. But I mean, I do worry about clients being afraid to call because they think, well, the meter starts. Lots of times it's just, we want you to call us before something bad happens. I would rather somebody call me and ask me a question. I mean, it's better for them if they ask me a question that takes me maybe 10 or 15 minutes to think about, and I stop them from doing something, or at least say, if you're going to do this, heads up, these are the issues. That's so much better than the client calling me. I had one recently where I wish the client had just made a 5-minute call to me and said, does this sound like a good idea? Because I would have been like, no.
And what was the idea? Are you able to talk about it? Like, what?
Oh, no. I can't talk about it, but I did. I had an anguish scream inside me. But it's good to have a relationship, and you don't necessarily have to have the daddy got bucks or anything like that. I think if you're starting out, it's wise to think about, okay, what kind of entity do I need? Is it just going to be me as a sole proprietor, or am I going to try an LLC, or what sort of business entity should I be? And that, what I would say is, I think it's great if you have the funds to go in and talk to a lawyer right off the bat. You might, just to get an overview of the information, try the volunteer lawyers for the arts organization, see what kind of, seminars and so forth they may have that may have information on like basics of this is how you set up a business as an artist. So I think the idea of doing that initial research and then saying, okay, now I think I need a lawyer to help me set this up, is really helpful and cost effective, I think.
Right. That makes a lot of sense.
I lost sight of the question.
Well, you talked about including a cheat sheet, and you mentioned to me you wanted to make a kind of a cheat sheet of maybe resources or quick tips or something. I'm wondering what goes on that. I've been in different meetings where you've given presentations and talks, you kind of led discussions, and you've really been a super helpful, completely free community resource, which is amazing. And I as you know, with art school and everything else, I've just tried to connect the really cool people I know who are either in the arts or supporting the arts to each other beyond just a local community to make a bigger national and international community. So what kind of cheat sheet do you feel like is a good universal or at least domestic cheat sheet that you're going to put together for people?
Okay, so it's a work in process. I think probably what I will do is definitely I really want to harp on the volunteer lawyers for the arts, because I do think that's so I'll have some suggestions of the major groups and also where to find out where, how do you look for it on your own to see whether there's somebody in your area. I think because I just went down the total rabbit hole on that fair use question, I'll definitely give something on. This is going to be a hodgepodge cheat sheet. I think I'll give some information on basic copyright information that's available, places to find that are good resources online, in particular, so you can get a little bit of more in-depth answer to that, and it's probably less confusing than my ramblings. There's some books out there that I like for lay people that are art law books, particularly some that deal with the artist gallery contract, which is less of an issue than it used to be, but still is pretty important. And also, there's some great books out there that, like if you're doing it on a shoestring, I definitely recommend you spend the $20 to get the book.
Right, absolutely. We have a lot of recommended reading in the art school program, so I can't wait to include that in. That'll be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And then I'll probably close my eyes and get a brainstorm in an hour or so. So, so there might be something else, but at least those things will be on it.
Oh, that's great. All right. Well, I look forward to having that, and also if you want to send that to me, and I can add in whatever non-legalese I can possibly help you with. I don't want this to be a burden to you, but I really appreciate you just handing out whatever you know to folks that hear this.
I guess I really want to stress that I think that the art law community is wonderful. I'm biased, but really, like some of our niches of the legal field are a little more cutthroat. But a lot of the art lawyers I know them throughout the country. They're good people who are interested in art and like working with artists, and so. If anything, I'd like to encourage people to know that the resources are out there. I'm not a unicorn. There's some other really great art lawyers out there, but I think that sometimes it's a bit daunting when you're thinking about working with a lawyer. I mean, well, of course it is. It's daunting for me, and I've done it for however many years. So
also as a lawyer for artists, you have a special rate that you give artists as well, right? There's some sort of discount, and that's kind of common with artists with lawyers that serve artists. They often will give some sort of a discount if they're really dedicated to the arts, such as yourself. There's some kind of you're an artist discount. That's nice.
And then also some of the bigger law firms. I mean, you're competing with quite a few people, but some of the bigger law firms they offer pro bono work. It's just. So
that's great.
They can usually do that more than the sole practitioners can do.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I have one more question. I have actually two, but one of them is when I say the word successful, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Regarding
what's your definition of success? I guess as I don't know. What's your definition of success?
I guess I think it's being able to really make your ideas happen. I guess I see it on a couple of fronts, but it's being able to, the way I see law playing into the success, so I guess that's the way I'm thinking the answer to this question is, particularly for arts, is I think of law as kind of the handmaiden for art, and that if it puts its, if law is working properly, it helps art be successful by kind of taking care of the details, which allows for a creative process. So you can have a joint venture with your friends, know that you hammered out all these details, and then just create. And give yourself as much freedom and flexibility and, basically craft something amazing. So I guess that's what I think of as success, is like being able to actually achieve your visions.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, achieve your visions. I love that. So my other question is, and I ask this of artists, but I think of anybody who's involved in the arts or even related, there's so many stereotypes about what a successful person, what their habits are. And I'm wondering, are you a morning person or a night person, a morning lark or a night owl, or maybe both, or maybe neither? I don't know. So which one?
Oh, that's so. It's funny now because I'm working with people in the U.S., but being based in Amsterdam, sometimes I'm a night owl because that's when I can talk to people. I tend to be at my best late at night or like mid morning. That's when I get most of my stuff accomplished.
That's funny. A lot of people
say that. I'm not a model for anyone. My methods are very bizarre. But
your two taglines is like Cinnamon Stevens. I am not a unicorn, and my methods are very bizarre.
Yes. Changing my LinkedIn profile as we speak.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I really want to thank you for making the time to talk about this. I know that it's a little bit dense and it's a lot to try to explain to the layperson, but I've loved working with you, and I've thoroughly enjoyed our friendship that has come from that. And I'm super excited that you were able to do this, and grateful
likewise.
And all that.
I'm happy to talk about this stuff. So, and I think, again, I think the art law community is amazing. So I love talking about it. It's just the best field.
For one, I'm very glad you're in it, because I am not, and you do great work. Absolutely, you help out a lot.
Thank you very much.
So, yeah, and so where can people learn more about you? Do you have a website or LinkedIn or Facebook or any of that? What's your website address?
Let's see. So basically, I do have a website, so I'm going to have to give you the link to that. I am finally going to have a blog as of September 1st. So basically right now, the best place to find out about me is this website, which is artantiquelaw.com.
How do you spell that? Art?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not the best person when it comes to coming up with these things, but artantiquelaw.com.
Okay.
And then my LinkedIn is that would be informative, but right now it's under construction. So
all right.
Everything, basically September 1st is when a bunch of things are taking off.
And what is the blog going to be? Is that still artantiquelaw.com/blog, or is that something else?
No, it's gonna be separate, and working on the name right now. So I will let you know as soon as we've decided. But there's a couple of ideas.
I'll add it as a note in this, and that's wonderful. And so if people want to find you, is it Cinnamon at Art Antique Law, or how do people find you?
Basically, that's probably the best. Let me make a note to I'll put a link on the cheat sheet as well.
Okay.
Yes, because as you know, I have that horrible email address.
So can people find you at the ear to email you? Cinnamon at artantiquelaw.com.
Let's see. It is, yes, I can.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I will be sure to include that in our information about you, and that's perfect. Thank you so much for talking about all this and being available, and I hope that artists in need find their way to you. I hope the wayward artists that are wandering in the world of non-contracts find their way to you, the guiding star.
Yeah, the contract obsessive, that's me. Okay, well, this was very fun, and obviously I wish everybody the best. I think it's a great time to be an artist, and that some of these things that were a little bit more inaccessible there's some phenomenal resources online.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You're just a wealth of information, and I'm so grateful to know you. Thank you, Cinnamon.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay. Bye.